right, hello everyone, and welcome to MCAT Success Secrets. Today is going to be an awesome night. We're super excited to have you all here. My name is Petros. I am here at med school headquarters. I head up our MCAT prep and tutoring programs, and I'm also a veteran MCAT teacher myself. I've been doing this for the last 25 years, so I am super thrilled that you're all here tonight. We'll get all your questions answered. We're going to talk about some pretty awesome things in terms of the MCAT and how to really kind of make sure that you're doing the right things, not forming the bad habits, as it were, so that you can be successful on this exam as you go forward. So as we get started, say hello, introduce yourself in the introduce yourself chat. So love to know kind of where everybody's from. Hello, Ray from New York City. Good to have you here. And then there's a second chat, which is labeled Ask a Question. So if you have questions as we go through this, please put them in there. We'll use the introduce yourself kind of as our conversation, and we'll use the question chat as the place for questions. And I'll be keeping an eye on that as we go through. Ellie from UC Davis. Awesome. I'm in California, too. I'm in Northern California as well. So not too far from you, like an hour or so. So Pittsburgh, New York. So we got folks coming in from everywhere. Super awesome, and different time zones, of course, right? So everybody is kind of a different point in the day. Kyle from Kansas, good to have you here, Kyle. I'm going to put a poll up on the screen just because I am curious about kind of where everybody is in terms of their MCAT prep, and really more importantly, when you're actually planning on taking the MCAT. So I've just put dates for 2025 for those of you that are testing this year, and then 2026 and beyond for everybody else. So just take a moment and fill this out real quick, just so that we can have a sense of kind of where everybody's at as part of their as far as their journey is concerned, and where you're going to be and when you're going to be testing for this all-important exam, as it were. So it looks like we have a lot of folks who are going to be testing in 26. So you are all super early. Luckily, nobody, well, I didn't put it on here, right? Nobody said, oh, I'm testing in April, because it is now officially May. So there are no more April test dates, as it were. So it looks like we got a lot of folks in September, and then a lot of folks in 2026, and then kind of a sprinkling in August and July, which is good. That means that there's time, and that means that there is plenty that you can be doing between now and when you take the test. And hopefully some of the stuff that we talk about here tonight will get those questions answered for you. I have, put a slide at the end for questions, but there's no need to wait to ask your questions. Feel free to ask them as we go through. I'll answer them when the time is right. So I'm not ignoring you. It's just haven't gotten to it yet, or maybe I know that we'll be talking about that as we go through. So, ask the questions, and we'll get them answered as we go through. So that all being said, let's dive into some of the secrets, as it were, that are necessary for doing well on the MCAT. Obviously, in the course of an hour, we're not going to be able to, solve all the world's problems, not going to be able to answer or, be able to get you to a perfect score on the MCAT, right? Like that's not going to happen in an hour, obviously. But hopefully this will kind of set you on the course for what you need to be doing and what you need to be thinking about, as it were. That's really the mission of med school headquarters. Can't say it any better than what's on the screen here. We're here to guide you and really be a resource for you as far as getting into med school, and then obviously, beyond, and of course, wearing that white coat, right? That is the ultimate goal. So I've got, a couple slides here, but we're going to use the slides, but we're not going to use them, as there's no notes. You don't take notes, right? This is not a class per se. But overall, kind of what I want to make sure that y'all leave here with tonight is really a better understanding of the purpose and then the nature of the MCAT, because the MCAT is a very different exam. So we'll be talking about that kind of throughout the course of the next hour or so. We'll talk a little bit about how to think about study calendars, how to build those study calendars, making sure that you are effectively using your time, especially if you already have a test date. If you don't already have a test date and you're planning on testing in 2025, please, after this is over, go and register for the exam, or have a conversation to figure out when the best time is going to be for you to be testing. And then we'll talk a little bit about this concept of spaced repetition, right? This is something that if you've used Anki, very very prominent as far as the basis of what Anki does, but really the overall idea of spaced repetition and the importance of it as you're studying for the MCAT and as you're kind of thinking about how you're structuring your own calendars, the spaced repetition definitely becomes a very, very large part of the success that you're going to need in order to really do well on this exam. So, those are kind of the four learning objectives that we have, things that I want you to walk away from here today as we go through this. So as you have questions, feel free to type them in and we'll get them answered for you as best as possible. So let's start with what the MCAT is. So you tell me, you can put this in the introduce yourself chat. What's the purpose of the MCAT? Like, why does this thing exist? Because nobody has ever said, oh, I'm so excited to go and take the MCAT, right? So this is not a normal thing, right? Nobody wants to take the MCAT is what it comes down to. But tell me what you have heard or what you think the purpose of the MCAT is. Like, why does it in fact exist? Why is it, why is it there? Why is its existence there? So put that into the chat. You can use the introduce yourself chat. So tell me what you think. There's a good number of you here, so I don't like silent folks. This is what it comes down to. So if you've got a thought, please put it in. Give you a second to do that right now. To show you can put the work in, that is part of it. That is part of it. Show medical schools your ability to utilize critical thinking and the prerequisite knowledge. Absolutely. Diagnosing patients. So Ray, we're going to talk a little bit about that for sure. These are good, right? There's nothing wrong, right? You can't get this wrong. I'm not going to, no one's watching you. The strength that you have in the understanding of each of these subjects. So that is part of it. Here's the deal. The MCAT exists for very, very specific reasons. And I'll give you a quick history lesson, actually. And this is not to bore you, but the history is actually important. Way, way back in the day, like when our grandparents were trying to become doctors, back in like up until really the 1930s, 1940s or so. The way that you got into med school was purely based, quite frankly, on who you knew and where you were going as an undergraduate, right? There were a lot of handshake agreements. There were a lot of like, I want to go become a doctor. Okay, can you pay the tuition? Come and become a doctor. There was no way for students from across the country to be able to demonstrate to medical schools their skills in a universal, standardized way. Right, so this was really a situation in which there was a kind of it leaned towards the privileged, right? It leaned towards those that were either able to afford it or they had connections of some kind. But what that also meant was about 20% of students who started medical school, and again, this is like ancient history relatively, but it's important for you to understand kind of the origins of all this. About 20% of the students who started medical school failed out after their first year because they may have had the connections, but they didn't actually have the skills necessary to be successful in a medical school curriculum. And as you can imagine, the medical school curriculum, was hard back then. It's hard now, right? There's nothing easy about going to medical school. So the MCAT in its previous iteration was put together as a means to, one, recruit students from across the country, especially to schools, because at the time, more of the medical schools were, concentrated in one region of the country. They were primarily concentrated in the East Coast. And so this was a means for the ability to recruit students. But at the same time, it was designed to make sure that students were prepared to undertake the medical school curriculum. And at its core, that has remained. Now, that's not to say that you need a perfect score on the MCAT in order to be able to, one, get into medical school or, to be able to do well in medical school, right? There are other kind of systems in place. There are other other things that will be, other resources that will be available to you in medical school, right? If, the MCAT score wasn't great, like, don't worry about that, right? So, but it's there really to serve this purpose of helping students I get identified. That all being said, it's only one aspect of the medical school application process. So yes, it's important. I'm not going to downplay that. But at the same time, there are plenty of students who get into medical school with MCAT scores that are, not as high as you might be thinking, what, competitive score is, because medical schools are looking at applicants as a whole. So yes, you want to do well on this exam. Yes, you want to understand what its purpose is, but at the same time, recognize that there are other factors. So, bottom line is, put the work in, show that you can do the work, that you can demonstrate the work, or demonstrate the skills. But at the same time, I wouldn't, this is not something that you want to be like, I need to get a 528, right? I need to get that perfect score in order to get into medical school. So that's why it's there. That's why this thing exists. It's there also because, quite frankly, when you're looking at medical school applicants, there are thousands of applicants to any one given school. So they have to, look at something. And of course, they could look at GPAs, right? And they do look at GPAs. But GPAs only show how you have performed in a very, very specific set of classes at a very specific school at a very specific time in your life, right? It's a very kind of narrow snapshot, if you will, right? It's a very kind of narrow snapshot, very limited as far as what it is. And even two students, maybe this has happened to you, two students at the same school may both take general chemistry, but one person took it with Professor A and one person took it with Professor B, and Professor B grades harder than Professor A or doesn't teach it as well as Professor A. So the MCAT is a standard, right? It's standardized. And so it's measuring all students against the exact same standard, the exact same metric. And so that's why this exam exists. And all of these things I'm sharing with you are important for you to kind of put in your mindset as you're starting to study for this exam, that this is really an opportunity for you to shine, right? Maybe the grades weren't as great when you were taking, organic chemistry, right? You're just trying to get through the class. Here's an opportunity for you to demonstrate your understanding of those skills. The second part of this, as far as the nature of the exam, and this is where it gets really interesting. And as I said, I've been doing this for 25 years. I've been an MCAT teacher. I've headed up MCAT programs, right? I've designed curriculum. That's why I'm here at med school headquarters, because now we're offering tutoring and eventually, more free resources and events like these as far as the MCAT is concerned, right? So I love talking about the MCAT is what it comes down to. The nature of the exam is that it will never actually reward you for simply knowing something. And I want you to put yourself into the mindset of a practicing physician. If a practicing physician knows a lot of stuff, but they're not able to actually apply that to the patients that they're serving, would that be beneficial? Yes or no? What do you think? If I just, I'm not a doctor, but if I was a doctor and I'm like, I know a lot of stuff, but I'm not actually going to apply it to anybody, I'm not actually going to do anything with my knowledge, it's not going to be a great situation, right? It's not going to be a great situation for the patient. It's not going to be a great situation for anyone, really. So when we think about the MCAT, we have to remind ourselves that you're never rewarded just for knowing something. You're rewarded for being able to apply the knowledge. It's kind of like, and I'm a fan of like detective movies and mysteries and all that good stuff. So put yourself into that mindset for a second. It's kind of like a little bit of a mystery, right? Patient walks into an exam room. They present with certain conditions, right? Maybe they've got a rash or a fever, and the doctor starts to play detective. This happened to me about 10 years ago. For no reason whatsoever, I ended up with a rash on one side of my body. Like there was no, it was just on my arms, like pretty much wherever I, wasn't exposed, or whatever was exposed, right? So like not the top part of my sleeve because that's where my my shirt would end, and then it was on my arm and then on my leg, and it turned out, right, the doctor had to ask a whole bunch of questions. They're like, what did you eat recently? And I was like, well, this. And he's like, well, that doesn't make sense because if it was from that, then it would be on both sides of your body. It turned out I'd stayed in a hotel room where you could like literally smell the bleach from the sheets, right? They'd used so much bleach in cleaning their sheets, which made me feel very safe and secure, right? In terms of I'm not going to get any cooties from the hotel room. But I had like a bleach allergy is basically what happened. My skin had been irritated is what had happened. So it was the doctor who was kind of going through this detective work process to figure out what was actually going on as far as why I had this random rash that I never had before in my life and I've never had ever since. So he goes through that process and then has to go through his knowledge base, right? His years of practicing medicine, years of practicing dermatology, to then make a decision as far as what course of action he's going to recommend that I follow in order to be able to make this rash that was quite itchy and quite uncomfortable go away. So that was where the critical thinking came into play, right? Where he was literally taking the information that he had gotten from me as the patient and the information that he had from his training and from his experience, and he put the two together, and here's the operative word, to reason out a diagnosis, right? He used his critical thinking skills to reason out a diagnosis. That skill, and hopefully you're with me at this point, that skill of critical thinking and reasoning is the same skill that's actually tested on the MCAT. The MCAT will present to you passages. They will present to you information that you have not seen before, and that's okay. It's your job to read those passages and to extract information from those passages and utilize your content knowledge that you have and put the two together to then be able to answer the questions that are being presented to you, not to reason out a diagnosis, but to reason out the correct answer choice. So there's literally a parallel. The answer choices are the diagnoses, right? They are the outcomes, the outputs that a physician would be doing. The critical thinking skill of marrying the information that you have in your head along with the information that was presented to you in the passages or in the questions, putting those two together is what you're going to need to be doing in order to be able to reason out the answer choice. So as you start thinking about how to prepare for this exam, absolutely, content review is going to be key. But I can tell you, hands down, I've seen far too many students, and unfortunately it's the students that we oftentimes end up speaking to who say, oh, I studied on my own, or I studied for the MCAT, and I ask them, well, what did you do for your studying? Well, I did flashcards, right? I did Anki decks. I reviewed content. I watched videos on YouTube, and I say to them, okay, that's all great. You've learned the information, but the MCAT doesn't reward you for just knowing the information. The MCAT rewards you for being able to apply the information. What did you do to actually build and develop and nurture your critical thinking skills? And their response is, well, I took some practice tests. And I say, okay, well, that's great. Did you actually go and review the questions? Did you actually go and review the practice tests? And they say, no, I didn't, because I felt I knew the content really well. So as you're thinking about this, you have to start incorporating this idea of how to actually be working and developing those critical thinking skills as you're moving forward, right? As you're developing yourself as an MCAT test taker. More importantly, you're already working on the skills that you're going to need to have for becoming a doctor, right? This is all connected is what it comes down to. So there's no such thing as a perfect test. By no means is the MCAT a perfect test, right? It will always have the opportunity to become a better test. Is it a perfect measure of someone? No test is, right? I mean, the test at the DMV when you're getting your driver's license, that is not a perfect test. Yet people who are really bad drivers still get their driver's license, right? And people who are really good drivers fail their driver's test sometimes. So the point is, you have to be kind of open to this idea of developing those critical thinking skills and at the same time reviewing content. The problem with reviewing content is that it's easy to do, right? And you feel good about yourself. Who would give me a thumbs up if I say that as humans, we like to do things that we're good at? Because I know that's true for me, right? If I'm not good at something, I'm going to try to do as little of that thing as possible, right? And this is just general human nature. We gravitate towards what we're good at. We have a tendency to do that, and that's okay. When you're studying for the MCAT, you have to. So if you take nothing away from today, here's the big thing that you have to take, that I want you to take away. When you're studying for the MCAT, here's how to be successful on the MCAT. You have to force yourself to always be in a position where you are feeling uncomfortable. Here's a solid example of what I mean by this. If you are a rock star at thermodynamics, you can answer any thermodynamics question. You could teach it to me, and I've been teaching this stuff for 20 plus years, right? You can come and teach me thermodynamics better than anybody else can teach me thermodynamics. And you're so good at it, you just keep doing thermodynamics questions because you feel real good about yourself when you're doing those thermodynamics questions. Then you go take the MCAT and you realize, well, there are other questions on the exam, right? There are other topics that they're testing you on. If you're not feeling uncomfortable, what's going to happen is you're going to get the questions that you're going to get correct, but you're not going to get the other ones that you've been getting incorrect. You got to flip it, right? That's where the points are. It's kind of like a scavenger hunt. You have to go and find those points. So as you're studying for this exam, get comfortable with feeling uncomfortable, right? It's like training, right? If you want to get stronger, you have to start to lift heavier and heavier weights, right? You have to try to run a little bit faster, a little bit faster, a little bit faster. But it's also very much like, physical exercise. You don't want to try to run the marathon on day one. You got to kind of slowly build up to that. You have to build that endurance. You have to build kind of your pace and get comfortable with it. You have to get good at things before you can get good at them and do them quickly, right? So if we took this from the perspective of like throwing darts, right? The first thing you have to do, and I don't play darts. If anyone plays darts, please tell me if this is a incorrect analogy. But if you're learning how to throw a dart and you want to hit the bullseye, the first thing you have to do is throw the dart slowly and train yourself, right? Figure out the process to hit the bullseye. Then you can do it quickly and throw multiple darts in succession and hit the bullseye every single time, right? So you have to be comfortable being uncomfortable, but you have to get really good at something before you can get good at it and do it quickly, right? Have a quick execution of those things, as it were. The question that I get asked most frequently is, how do I improve my MCAT score? Right? That's why you're all here. Would anyone disagree with me that you're here because you don't want to improve your MCAT score? Right? So this is hopefully no one's going to say, no, I'm here because I want my MCAT score to go down. Right? You're here because you want your MCAT score to go up. That's the question I get asked all the time. And the answer that I give is a very, very simple one. You have to get more questions correct. And that's not a cop-out answer. That is the reality. You have to adopt the mindset. So write this down, take note of this, do whatever you want, however you're going to remember this. But you have to adopt the mindset of, how am I going to get this question that I got wrong correct the next time I see one that is like it? You have to be always asking yourself that. How do I get more questions right? How am I going to get this question correct? If you do that and you stick to that mentality, I can assure you with a very, very high degree of confidence that the score will follow. Anybody ever get fixated on the score? Whether it's the MCAT or a grade in school? Yes, no? I see a couple people saying, yeah, right? This is normal. We get fixated on numbers, right? If it's a sport, you want to run faster. I've got to get to this number as far as my speed from my mouth. The way I'm talking about these things, that you would think that I'm a runner. I'm not a runner. Um, I just realized that I'm like, the way I'm talking about it, it makes me sound like I'm somebody who's actually trying to run faster. I'm not trying to run any faster than I can run right now. Moral of the story, though, is if you get fixated on that outcome, you're fixated on the wrong outcome, right? You need to always, always, always be focused on what I can be doing to get more questions correct. In order to do that, it's going to be a combination of content. It's going to be a combination of critical thinking skill development. And it's going to be, part of that is also going to be on endurance, right? Being able, this is a 7.5 hour exam. It's a long day. We don't normally take 7.5 hour exams. I don't, right? This is not something that's in our norm. Finals aren't even that long, right? Even finals at schools that are 3 hours long, that's about as long as you're gonna see it. So this is not something that you can just go and take the next day, right? Ray asked the question, what's the shortest amount of time one should spend on content review? I wouldn't say there's a short amount of time. I wouldn't say there's a long amount of time. Ray, I'm holding to answer your question because I've got a visual that I think will better answer that question for you as we go through here. But it's always going to be about putting the focus on what is it going to take me to get this right the next time, right? And that's where your analysis is going to come into play, right? If you're working with a tutor, your tutor is going to work with you on that analysis. If you're working on your own, that's fine too. You need to work on that analysis on your own. You need to be asking. You got to be very inquisitive, right? Part of becoming a physician and being a practicing physician is to be inquisitive, right? Ask the questions. Take the tests, right, of the patient to see what's going on, right? Why does the blood work look the way that the blood work looks? So finding those answers is going to be absolutely, absolutely key for you, as it were. Let's talk a little bit about this idea of study calendars. I cannot emphasize enough how important and how necessary it is for you to be building out calendars. And when I say building out calendars, I don't mean I'm going to study for 5 hours per day. Okay, if I came to you and I said I'm going to study for 5 hours per day, you'd say, okay, great. It's 5 hours per day. But there's a difference between 5 hours per day and 5 hours per day. And here's what I mean by this. Simply put, you need to be structuring your time. One, your calendar needs to be as realistic as possible, okay? And the reason for this is because as humans, not only do we like to do things that we're really good at, but give me a thumbs up or some indication that you agree with what I'm about to say here. We like to do things that we're good at, and we're really good at procrastinating. Anybody disagree with that statement? That human beings in general, we're really good at procrastinating, right? Yeah. So I see a couple emojis coming through, right? We are rock stars when it comes to procrastinating. And here's what I mean by this. If you say to yourself, I'm going to study for 6 hours on Saturday, and you don't actually have it mapped out, I can almost guarantee that when Saturday morning rolls around and you've had a long week because you've been in school and you've been volunteering and you've been in the lab or you've been in the hospital, right? All the things that you're doing, Saturday morning rolls along, you wake up at, 7 o'clock, 8 o'clock, and you say, I'm just going to sleep in a little bit more, or I'm going to look at Instagram, or I'm going to, check out TikTok and see what's there. And then your friend texts you and says, hey, do you want to meet for coffee or, go grab a bite to eat, for lunch later on today? And you say, yeah, we haven't hung out in a while. It's okay. I'm going to study for 6 hours today, but I'll just start that a little bit later. And then it's, 2 o'clock and you say to yourself, I'm a little tired now. I'm going to take a nap, or it's a nice day out, especially, this is my favorite time of the year, right? We're kind of in the middle of spring, right? For the most part, I know the weather's been a little bit crazy in some parts of the country, right? But generally speaking, it's like a nice time of year. You're like, I'm going to go for a walk, or I'm going to go for that run, or whatever it might be. it's okay. I'm going to study for 6 hours later on today. And then all of a sudden, it's 6 o'clock at night. Now you're hungry because it's getting close to dinner time. And you make yourself some dinner and you say to yourself, I'm going to study for 6 hours. Then all of a sudden it's 8 o'clock and you say, there's no way I could study for 6 hours now because I would be up until 2 a.m. I'll just do it tomorrow. That happens, right? I can assure you, somewhere in the world, that happened today, right? There's some pre-med out there who did that. Maybe it was you, right? I don't know. Like, I'll just do it tomorrow. So if you just go in with this kind of very, Karen, I'm glad that resonates with you, right? Because it's just reality. I'm not being critical. I'm a pretty transparent person. I'm not being critical. It's just reality, right? This is just how life is. I've done this, right? I did this last weekend. I had a bunch of things I needed to do, and I kept saying, I'll just do it, I'll do it. And then eventually I got nothing done, and because I was exhausted from the week before, right? So, like, this is just how life is. You don't have the luxury of time to allow that to happen to you too often, right? Taking breaks, planning in breaks in your overall studying, hugely important, like absolutely necessary. Make sure that you're blocking off at least a day per week where you're doing nothing MCAT related. You're just really doing nothing that you're committed to other than fun stuff, right? Go for a hike, go for a walk, do whatever it is that you do to kind of unwind. Like, great. That's what I want you to do. I like to go for drives. Like, this is probably not very environmentally friendly, but that's what I like to do. Do whatever it is that makes you happy, right? Take that time off. But for the time that you are structuring, you want it to be specific in that it's not just a number of hours that you're going to be studying in a given day, but literally you put in time blocks. And then in those time blocks, you actually define ahead of time what it is that you're going to be doing. Okay? What I don't want you to do, especially those of you that are testing this year, is I don't want you to go through and map out the entirety of the summer, right? If you're testing in August, don't go and build a calendar between now and August, because I can assure you what you're going to need to work on is going to change based on what your performance is and where your performance is. Right? Your performance should be dictating to you what it is that you're working on next. In addition to being, so like now I've defined human beings as people who like to do things that they're good at. I've defined them as procrastinators, but I'm also going to say that we are very, very, so tell me if you disagree with this statement. It's kind of a little insight into ourselves, right? We are very good at kind of getting distracted and being attracted to the shiny ball, right? All of a sudden, ooh, shiny ball, right? My attention goes to that thing. The shiny ball, when it comes to the MCAT, is oftentimes the question or the passages or the content area that we've gotten wrong. And I've given this example 1,000 times, so if you've heard me say this before, I apologize, but I will say this until until my days are over, right? I had a student years ago. Her name was Sarah. Everything worked out fine. She's a practicing physician now. So, like, Sarah did just great, right? But this is a true story. The MCAT used to be offered twice per year, not 30-ish times per year. And it was a paper and pencil exam. It was offered in April and in August. And you had to physically go to a large kind of convention center usually to take this exam. And so what I would do is I would go to the testing site the morning of the exam. And I live in Northern California where it's quite foggy. So I'd go to the testing site and we'd have snacks for our students, right? So go there to kind of wish them well, 7 o'clock in the morning, good luck as you're checking in. Here's some snacks that you can have before you get started and, throughout the day. And I had this student, Sarah, come running up to me in excitement, Petros, I'm so happy to see you. I was like, oh, I'm happy to see you too. Like, good luck on the exam. She looks at me and she goes, and mind you, it's like 7:30 in the morning on a Saturday. I don't want to be thinking about sciencey things. She says to me, can you go over alpha and beta decay with me in like a couple minutes? Because I did a question last night and I got it wrong and I'm freaking out that I'm not going to know about alpha and beta decay. I looked at her and I said, you're 30 minutes from starting your MCAT. Alpha and beta decay is a low yield topic. Don't worry about it. And she kind of gave me a look and I was like, just trust me on this. Don't worry about it. I see her the next week. she comes in actually to tell me, you were 100% correct. There was no alpha, beta, decay on the MCAT. The reason I share the story is, as you're going through your studying, there are going to be times where you're going to like get something wrong, and then all of a sudden you're going to find yourself obsessed with that one topic, and you're going to only want to work on that. By building out a calendar that is specific, where you've actually said, today I'm working on thermodynamics, and next Tuesday I'm working on alpha and beta decay or optics or whatever it might be, that gives you more structure so that you don't get distracted by things and you stay on target and you actually cover the topics you need to be covering. All right, so just bear that in mind. You want your calendar to be specific as far as time. You want it to be specific about what it is that you're doing and when it is that you're doing it. You want to map it out maybe 2-3 weeks in advance to then give you the flexibility, because your calendar, your study plan will change, right? It will evolve because you will evolve as you're going through this process. You want to make sure that you have those things in. What you also want to make sure that you do, and this is just life in general, is you want to make sure that you actually schedule in all the other things that you're going to be doing, right? If you are volunteering, if you're taking classes, if you're helping with family members, or you take care of someone, like all those things, you have to be realistic, and you got to budget in your sleep, right? You have to stay kind of physically healthy and mentally healthy throughout this process, right? You have to make sure that all those things are coming into play. All of that together builds out your study calendar, right? Those are all the elements that come into it. I'm not going to give you a number of hours that you should be studying per week. What I want you to be thinking about is, overall, you're probably going to spend about 300 or so hours studying for this exam. That includes taking practice exams, right? It's all the things. It includes reviewing practice exams, watching videos, right? All the things that you're going to do to prep for this exam. Then you have to kind of roughly look and see, well, how much time do I need to be budgeting per week, depending on where you are today, when you're starting, and when you're finishing, right? So that's real easy back of the envelope math that you could very easily do, right? So roughly speaking, that's what's going to come down to. However, depending on where you are in your prep, there might be weeks where you're doing more, especially the weeks that you're taking full-length exams, because those do take 7.5 hours, right? So that's a lot of time that's invested into just taking the exam, and then the amount of time that you're going to spend reviewing the exam is going to come into play as well. So you have to make sure that you're kind of accounting for all of those things as it comes together. All right, so important to kind of keep that in mind, as it were. If you got questions about this, by all means, let us know. Let me know. So that's kind of the way to do that. Kayla asked you a question: the difference between being uncomfortable and not focusing on the shiny object. So when I say you want to force yourself to be uncomfortable, that is to force yourself to move away from things that you're good at. The shiny objects are these little blips that come up where all of a sudden you go, oh, I got this one question wrong about PV equals nRT. Now I need to go study for 5 hours, right? Ideal gas laws for 5 hours. Like that's not what you need to be. That's not how you need to be looking at it. You need to be looking at it and saying, okay, that is something that I'm going to note. I'm going to schedule time for it, and I will come back to it when that time is there, right? As opposed to, I'm going to drop everything else and go to the PV equals nRT. So hopefully that makes sense. So it's not about moving on. I see your follow-up question. It's not about moving on. It's about making sure that you're allocating the time as opposed to just letting it detract you from doing the other things that you already planned on doing. So hopefully that helps. If you need more clarification on that, let me know. Keith had a good question. How many MCAT tests do most traditional applicants usually take? As far as kind of a good number, 4 to 5 is generally a good number, but you need to space them out. The last thing you want to be doing is taking a full-length exam like every other day, right? That's like the worst thing you can do for yourself. So it all kind of depends on when you're testing. I mean, that's something that we can help you, figure out with one of our tutors, like when it is that you should be taking those full-length exams. I mean, we have a student, right now who's testing in like 3 weeks. They're not going to take 5 exams, right? They've already taken a couple, they'll take a few more, and that'll be fine, right? So it's, you want to get yourself, once you're getting closer to the exam, into a cadence of trying to take one per week, ideally on the day of the week that you're going to be taking the real exam. So if your real exam is, on a Friday, then you want to be taking your full-length exams ideally on a Friday, right? That's the case there. These are practice exams, so practice exams count. Ideally, as far as the real exam, you go and take it once and you're done with it. You never have to look at the thing again, right? So if you need to, you can always retest, right? There's no problem with that, but you want to go into it. The thing that I hate hearing, and I hear this from parents a lot too, so maybe your parents have said it, I don't know, but I hear this from students and from parents of, I'm going to go, my daughter's going to go and take the real MCAT, but it's just for practice. I'm like, why would you go take the real MCAT just for practice? Like, the score is going to show up. It's going to be on it's going to be on the record. Like, don't go into it. And it's expensive too, right? It's like $400 to take the exam almost. So like, not great. So take practice exams. But just taking practice exams is one thing. It's the benefit of taking practice exams is to review them, right? To actually go through this exercise. And here's, when you go through your practice exams, here's another bit of advice that you can write down and always remember. When you get a question wrong on any multiple choice exam, you've actually made 2 errors. You haven't made 1 error. You've made 2, right? You're like, oh, I got it wrong. That's 1 error. No, you made 2 errors. The 2 errors that you made was, 1, you rejected, right? You justified to yourself that the correct answer was in fact wrong. And then you justified to yourself, you convinced yourself that the incorrect answer was in fact correct, right? So you've made 2 mistakes, right? You did a miscalculation, or you used the wrong formula, or you thought about it in a flipped manner, right? So you have to, as you go through your practice exams, you have to account for that. You have to ask yourself, why did I reject the right answer, and why did I accept the incorrect answer as being correct? And you want to analyze that and then start to identify patterns, right? So is it a content area? Is it a formula issue? Is it a concept issue? Is it a critical thinking issue, right? Is it the wording, right? The MCAT loves extreme answer choices, right? They'll say, the only way to do this. And you're like, oh, wait a minute, that's a little bit extreme, right? They love those as wrong answer choices. So you have to kind of get into that mindset, as it were, as you're going through. Coupled with the study calendars is this, and I've put this kind of rough image together for you, but bear with me on this. Over on the left, the gray side of all this, that's the beginning of your MCAT prep. On the right side, that's test day, right? That's the actual MCAT. In the early days, so Ray, I think you'd asked this question, so here's the answer. In the early days of your preparation, you're going to be spending more time in the gray, this content review and developing your critical thinking skills. But as each day progresses, that should start to diminish. And what you're going to slowly introduce is the blue triangle, right? So more and more application of the actual content, right? So as you review content, you then want to do a little bit of application. As you get further along in the process, it's going to be a little bit more practice and a little bit more application and a little less content review, because you've already kind of banked that. And then as you get deeper and deeper into your prep, it's going to be more about building those endurance skills. And quite frankly, as you get later into your preparation, you're actually doing hardly any content review. The only content that you should be reviewing is content that you were kind of pointed towards based on your performance on practice questions and on practice exams, right? So you let the tests kind of dictate to you where it is that you should be putting focus on things, right? So this is how you really build your skills. So this is the continuum of your MCAT prep from start to finish. It's never going to be the same, right? this idea of spaced repetition then comes into play. So if you were to follow the kind of bad way, I'll keep it simple, all right? Keep it simple and stupid is kind of a great mantra in life. If you followed the bad way of doing things, then you would do all this like this heavy content review early on, and you wouldn't do any practice of the actual application of the content, any practice of questions, no like, section tests or full-length exams. And then eventually you would start to do all those. The MCAT, each question on the MCAT is at the intersection of a content area and a critical thinking skill or reasoning skill. That is, every question on the MCAT is at that intersection. The second thing about the MCAT, which is completely different from any exam that you've ever taken as far as the science exam is concerned, more likely than not, is that it is a fully integrated exam, right? There's no physics section on the MCAT. There's a chemical and physical sciences section on the MCAT, right? It's the chemical and physical foundations of biological sciences is the official name of the section. And that's because they are testing you, they are evaluating you on your ability to apply chemical and physical sciences to biological systems, because you're going to become a doctor, right? Everything's connected. Classic example, circulatory system, right? If you disagree with me on this, we need to have a discussion. The circulatory system, we are taught about the circulatory system in biology class, right? That is where you were exposed to the circulatory system. I would make a bet on that, right? Like, that is where you were exposed to the circulatory system. But the circulatory system, really, at the end of the day, is nothing more, it's very important, but it's nothing more than a series of hoses, which are your arteries and your veins and your capillaries, a pump, which is your heart. The heart is basically a mechanical pump. And then fluids that are moving through those hoses and that pump. And then in those fluids, there are red blood cells, right? There are other chemicals, right? There are proteins. But all of those are really just chemicals, right, at the end of the day. So really, when you're looking at the circulatory system, it's a physics problem, is what it comes down to. It's disguised as a biological system, but I could ask you hundreds of questions about the cross-sectional area and the velocity that the blood is flowing and whether the viscosity or the density of the blood is going to affect the outcome. Or if you have a clogged artery, what's going to happen? You're going to have a narrowing as far as the cross-sectional area of hose. I mean, it's all physics at the end of the day, and chemistry, right? If I change the pH of the blood, what's going to happen? If I increase if there's a higher water concentration, then I'm going to have, it going down its concentration gradient into the organs, causing an edema. That's all physical sciences. It's all connected. The MCAT tests you on these subjects, on these topics, in an integrated fashion, unlike how you've been tested and you've been taught, quite frankly. So you have to start thinking differently about how this exam comes into play, right? And how these topics are going to come together. You have to start thinking about it in an integrated fashion, right? Your physics professor taught you physics the way that a physicist wants you to know physics. Same with your chemistry professor, same with your OChem professor, same with your biochem professor. So as you're building these skills, the integration needs to start to come into play as well. Okay? So if you got questions about that, let us know, right? Or let me know. I keep saying us, like there's more than me here is what it comes down to. But yeah, got questions about that? Type them into the question chat that's there. But that's a good way to look at this. Last slide in terms of kind of formal slides here. Taking the MCAT is kind of like going grocery shopping. You're sitting there going, what is this guy talking about? What does the MCAT have to do with going grocery shopping, right? So here's what I mean by this. So here's another life lesson for you, but all connected to the MCAT. If you go to the grocery store, grocery stores, from a business perspective, are the most calculated, most well thought placement exercise that exists in humanity. Here's what I mean by this. There's a reason why the kids' cereals, if you go to the cereal section of the grocery store, there's a reason why the kids' cereals are a little bit lower on the shelves. I did this when I was a kid. You've done this when you were a kid. If you go to the grocery store, you're looking, you're like, oh, look at the cartoon tiger or whatever it might be. Tell me if I'm lying when I say this, right? This is it's all deliberately placed. Same thing with the milk, right? Everybody, for the most part, right, pretty large percentage of the population, when they go to the grocery store, especially when you're kids and the family or whatever, you need to get milk. The milk is always at the back of the grocery store, and that's deliberate. So it forces you to walk through the store and see everything to get to the milk. Right, so the staples are towards the back of the store. The eggs are, if there are eggs, right? Sometimes there are no eggs now these days, but they're always at the back of the store. So if you go to the grocery store without a list, you will fall for all the traps that the grocery store companies have deliberately set, right? There's a reason why they, put the display of the really tasty cookies, and they say it's, buy two, get one free. And you're like, oh, I don't need those, but I really like those cookies. So I'm going to pick up my two and get my one for free. And you put it in the cart and you go check out. You feel a little guilty, but you got one for free. So no big deal. Those traps are designed very deliberately. The MCAT does the exact same thing. Here's what I mean by this. If you go to the grocery store with a shopping list, then you go through the grocery store and you pick up every item that you need, no more, no less, right? You get home and you have checked everything off of the grocery list. And you haven't been, distracted. You haven't had that impulse buy of getting something that wasn't on the list. If you go to the grocery store the way I go to the grocery store, so talk about, not actually doing the thing that I tell people to do, right? The way I go to the grocery store is I grab a cart and I literally kind of stake my way up and down the aisles, and I find what I need on the shelves and I put it in the cart. And inevitably I get home and I realize that I have forgotten to buy something that I needed, which then necessitates another trip to the grocery store. Or I have bought something that I already had plenty of, right? There was a point in my life, I'm not a big fan of mayonnaise, but there was a point in my life where I had like 3 jars of mayonnaise in my fridge, because every time I went to the grocery store, I said, oh, I need mayonnaise. And I would buy them and I realized, oh, no, I have it. So like friends got a lot of mayonnaise is what happened. So if you go into the MCAT, if you go into the answer choices of the MCAT, and you're kind of going with that old mentality of, let me look at the answer choices and find one that works, I can assure you, you are going to fall for the traps, because, there are 4 answer choices on the MCAT. 1 of them is correct. 3 are incorrect for a very specific reason. They have designed these traps there, just like the grocery store has designed the traps. What you need to do is you need to go into the answer choices looking for something. So part of kind of your homework and part of what I want you to start thinking about as far as you're studying for this exam is train yourself to start making predictions, right? I'm looking for the answer choice that tells me that when the pressure has increased, this is what's happened to the temperature. As opposed to looking for one, or finding one, stumbling upon one, right? You want to go in looking for the very specific answer choice. I want to find the one that's negative. I want to find the one that's closest to, 0, whatever it might be. So the art of training yourself to make predictions as you're going through the questions is one that takes time to develop, but it is one that is very developable. I don't know if that's a word, but you can develop it, right? But it's something that you need to very actively work on so that you can avoid those traps. So never forget, taking the MCAT, it's like going grocery shopping. Part of the reason and the excitement that I have for being here at Med School headquarters, as I mentioned earlier, is that we're going to have more and more resources available specifically for MCAT preparation. So, right now we've started things off in terms of we're offering live tutoring. So if you want one-on-one tutoring, it's really coaching, mastery, kind of figuring out what it is that you need to be doing. We have that available. If you want to schedule some time, it's free. Want to schedule some time with me to talk about kind of what your right plan should be, feel free to use the QR code, right? So just, grab some time. More than happy to kind of walk you through what the different options are and what would be right for you. Everything is custom tailored to what your individual needs are. So set up some time. More than happy to spend some time with you to kind of figure out what you need to be doing in order. And I'm not going to, it's not going to be a tutoring session. It's not going to be like, give me the resources that, that I'm going to need. It's like, because we can't answer that in 15 minutes, but it can help you at least like get things going, right? As far as figuring out, okay, I'm going to need this much tutoring. I'm going to need to dedicate this much time, et cetera, et cetera. We can help you figure all those things out. The other side, and this is for later, right? So not necessarily just yet if you're still in this kind of MCAT phase, but as you kind of progress through the continuum of the journey for applying to med school, we also have one-on-one experts available for all the things related to the application, right? They are a rock star group of individuals that I'm quite frankly very thrilled and impressed by every single day to get to work with. They've all been admissions officers of some med school, right, in some capacity, and they are phenomenal, is what it comes down to. That's me really underselling it. They are masters of the craft of really making sure that you're ready with all the things, right? As far as the essays, telling your story, how to interview, right? All those pieces. So that's the second part of this, right? So there's MCAT, there's admissions. It all is one big happy piece, if you will, to get you into the white coat, right? Is really what it comes down to. Alexander had a question about how early before I take the MCAT should I start preparing. Really, well, you don't want to start too early, but ideal world, give yourself 4 to 5 months. That way you can kind of space things out. I mentioned this earlier, roughly 300 total hours studying for the exam. So if you need to do that in 3 months, that's just going to mean, a more intensive period. But if you can spread it out over 4 to 5 months, even better. One is not better than the other. It's not about the amount of time, it's about the efficiency of the time, right? That spaced repetition of coming back to material. We kind of touched on it, but the idea that you learn something, you practice with it, and then you come back to it, and then you're better at it, and then you come back to it at a higher level, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, as it were. Keith, if you're not planning for a gap year, then is it okay to take the MCAT after sophomore year when you haven't taken psych or soc yet? So here's what I would do. If you haven't taken psych or soc, go to the AMC website. This is a question I get a lot. Go to the AMC website, look up the topics that are on the MCAT as far as psychology and sociology. And you can either, use the Khan Academy videos that are available. There's plenty of information as far as Wikipedia is concerned. And the reason why I say that is that at some schools, part of my job is I speak to a lot of advisors. At some schools, unfortunately, the topics that are on the psych and soc section of the MCAT, the behavioral sciences section of the MCAT, are spread out over like 3 or 4 different courses. You don't need to go take 3 or 4 different courses, right? This is material that you can definitely kind of learn on your own, but you got to get practice with it, is what it comes down to. So I would say, there's that. It is fine to take the MCAT after your sophomore year. Not a problem at all. What a lot of students will do is they'll finish up their sophomore year, they'll study for the MCAT over the summer, take it in September, and then you don't have to worry about it during your junior year. If things don't go perfectly according to plan, you can retest in January, right? So like you're still okay, as it were. So that's the key there. S, I'm going to call you S. How do you improve? And you're very welcome. I'm glad this was informative. How can you improve the critical thinking skills? Critical thinking skills really do take some time to improve. The main thing about critical thinking skills is training yourself to be able to identify the argument and then be able to manipulate that argument, right? How can I strengthen it? How can I weaken it? How can I connect the dots? So it's all about training yourself on how to connect the dots. And that's what, we spend a lot of time with our tutoring students doing, is really learning how to connect the dots and how to work on those pieces there. So a lot of practice reading is a great way to do that as well as it were. I'll do a last call for questions. I did want to take an opportunity here to thank all of you for being here tonight. If you have questions, by all means, reach out to us as those pop in your minds. And if you have kind of questions about kind of how to get started with tutoring and all those things, by all means, please do reach out. We'll post the recording. You'll get a copy of it since you registered here for tonight. So keep an eye out for that. You can look at this if you wanted to in the future. How frequently should I take the test, given I'm planning on testing in August? Roughly speaking, you're going to want to probably not take a full-length exam until sometime in mid-June, then maybe once every couple of weeks, then the 3 weeks or so leading up to the exam, once per week. So, and Alexander, as far as where and how should you start preparing, I think that goes back to the slide I showed earlier, right? So early days, more content review, that slowly starts to diminish off as you incorporate more and more application, practice, and endurance. So those will be the kind of the key parts in all of this. Good times. If you have a question, I see a couple of people have their hands raised to speak. Just type your question into the chat. I'd be more than happy to answer those for you as we go. But if there are any final questions, please let me know. Let me see. There's some questions in the non-question chat, so give me a second here. Kyle, you're very welcome. How do you determine when to take the MCAT? Can you take it if you haven't taken physics yet? You can take it if you haven't taken physics yet, but you have to still learn the physics, right? So that's up to you, Azita, right? Depending on how comfortable you are with that. We can teach you the physics, right? We can pair you with a tutor who will teach you the physics as well. We actually are doing that with a couple students right now, like actively at this moment in time. So that is possible. The way to determine when to take the MCAT, one, you want to look at when you're planning on applying so that you make sure that you take it kind of in line with that. But at the same time, you want to make sure that you feel ready, right? This isn't an exam that you want to just go and take. You want to make sure that you actually have a prep plan in store and, kind of are adjusted and aligned with that, as it were. Julia, as far as how in-depth should the content review be before we start taking full-length exams, I'm not going to give you an hours per chapter because there is no answer to that. It's going to be different for everyone. But it's also, you don't want to do the thing where you're like all in on content review and then you go take a full-length exam. You need to, it goes back to what I was showing earlier. You got to start with content review and slowly start to incorporate more and more application and practice. You will be doing some form of content review up until you take the exam. You'll have more intense periods of time earlier on versus later on, right? So it's not it's not going to be as much later on, but the full length exams will also help you uncover what more content it is that you need to go and do. So you can use them kind of as a gauge to figure out, okay, you know what? I do need a little bit more in this area, right? So that's going to be part of it as well. Hopefully that answers it. Yeah, I can't tell you how many hours per chapter because that's going to vary for everybody, right? Fast reader, slow reader, how many notes you like to take, right? All those things that come into play. So it's impossible to tell what it's gonna be. I don't even know what chapters you're referring to, right? So it was a long chapter, short chapters, right? All those things. So, but always be doing practice, right? Always be incorporating practice questions as you're going through. That's going to be a big part of it as well. Cool. Well, thank you everybody for joining us here today. Really appreciate you being here and being so engaged. We have more of these, so check out premedevents.com for those. For those that are coming up, I'll post that here in the chat. Those are the upcoming events, as it were. Glad it was helpful. You're very welcome. But thanks, everybody, and we will see you here hopefully at the next one. So we're going to do a little deeper dive into the anatomy of the MCAT, do a little dissection, if you will. Take care, everybody. Have a great rest of your day.